Foi uma das maiores provas de resistência já realizadas. Colocar um homem e seus cavalos diante dos perigos de uma jornada de 16 mil quilômetros. Mas esses não eram cavalos comuns. Foram criados para ser os mais resistentes, os mais ágeis e destemidos do mundo. A criação de tal raça foi obra de um mestre. Mestres. Dom Emílio Solanet, o mestre dos cavalos. Esses são descendentes dos conquistadores, homens extraordinários que se aventuraram além das fronteiras do mundo conhecido. E seus cavalos são igualmente notáveis. O cavalo crioulo dos vaqueiros argentinos moldou a história do país, mas depois quase foi extinto. Esses cavalos teriam desaparecido se não fosse pelo trabalho de um homem que resolveu salvar a raça da extinção. Mas como Emílio Solanet criou uma raça de cavalos considerada a mais resistente do mundo. Cavalos que percorreram as maiores distâncias da história e que inspiraram aventureiros até hoje. Em junho de 2002, essa jovem se preparava para uma jornada incrível. Marianne Ditois, uma fotógrafa sul-africana, estava determinada a cavalgar da Argentina até Nova York. Ela passaria por desertos, florestas e montanhas e percorreria mais de 16 mil quilômetros. O propósito da jornada era reconstituir a maior façanha de resistência equina da história, que perfizera a mesma rota 80 anos atrás. Seria um imenso teste de resistência para a Amazônia, assim como para seus cavalos. Mas esses não são cavalos comuns. Seu pedigree remonta à época dos conquistadores. Buenos Aires é uma cidade com mais de 12 milhões de pessoas, uma das mais cosmopolitas da América Latina. A cidade foi fundada em 1580, mas era a segunda tentativa. Nesse mesmo lugar, 40 anos antes, os conquistadores hispânicos haviam sofrido sua maior derrota. Eles partiram esperançosos rumo à conquista, sem poupar dinheiro e homens.
The first Argentine horses came over with the expedition of Pedro de Mendoza in 1535. And this was the largest expedition the King of Spain had ever funded. You know, this is like President Bush talking about going to Mars. He's going to spend billions on this because he's got a stake. He figures it's going to pay back.
O que o outro lado do oceano escondia de tão valioso? Buenos Aires situa-se na foz do Rio de la Plata, o Rio da Prata. Os conquistadores acreditavam que poderiam explorar o solo e tinham uma arma secreta para assustar os índios, o cavalo.
They'd never seen horses before. They'd never seen that species. It isn't native to North America. They'd never seen a horse, and particularly, they had never seen a centaur, a man on horseback. And they could not understand this creature that apparently had, 2 arms and 4 legs.
No início, o plano parecia estar funcionando, mas veio a desgraça. 5 anos depois da chegada, em meio a doenças, safras perdidas e ataques indígenas, a colônia desmoronou. Os soldados morreram de fome para não violar um decreto real.
There is a mandate in Spanish crown law that says if you eat a horse, you better be able to justify that to the king. They protected those horses at the expense of the lives of the people who were on the expedition. And it meant that there was cannibalism in the colony. And if it weren't for that fact, we wouldn't have any criollos, because they're descended from the horses that didn't get eaten.
Os poucos sobreviventes voltaram para a Espanha, mas não havia espaço para levar os preciosos cavalos. E assim se inicia um dos episódios mais notáveis da história natural. Os 44 cavalos que foram deixados pelos colonizadores derrotados fugiram para os Pampas.
We have over 36 head, which is more than sufficient to seed a new population explosion in such a favorable environment. By the first part of the next century, you're talking 10,000 horses. In another 60 years, we're talking millions.
Os especialistas em equinos tentaram analisar a causa desse crescimento populacional surpreendente.
In the Pampa situation, you have everything the way nature intended, including reproduction. We are trying to get horses to breed out of season. We're trying to get them to breed when they are not meant to. They are what we call seasonally polyestrous. In other words, they have several seasons in a block at the correct time of year so that they drop foals after their 11-month pregnancy at an appropriate time for nutrition to produce lactation in the mare and young lush grass for the foal. And that's the way nature intended it. We interfere by trying to get the breeding season moved.
Os cavalos que vieram do outro lado do mundo rapidamente se adaptaram ao novo habitat.
In the Pampas, the biological rhythm would entrain with the light, the sunlight, and the year. So the horse would very quickly, probably within 1 year, but certainly with a year and a half, if it had come from a different time zone in Spain, would quickly readjust its reproductive capacity to match exactly spring, autumn, and so on, so that it then bred precisely when biologically it should have bred.
If you have a population and there are no predators or very insignificant and an ideal environment, you're going to get logarithmic increase, and that's exactly what we're describing. It's going to go up by an order of magnitude every time unit you go by. So the curve of population increase, it doesn't go like that. It goes like that.
Os nativos que antes temiam os cavalos rapidamente os adotaram. Quando uma nova geração de colonizadores chegou para tomar os Pampas, os índios e seus cavalos foram ameaçados. As grandes fazendas de gado construídas nos Pampas no século XIX não deixaram espaço para os índios e seus cavalos. E na mesma velocidade em que se reproduziram, agora estavam desaparecendo.
If you look at the records from the middle of the 18th century, there were millions of them. By Solinet's time, that's another 100 years, or 75 years later, they had dwindled to almost nothing. And this was due to policies of extirpation, similar to the extirpation of the buffalo in North America. So the government went in there and with a policy to try to reduce the numbers of Native Americans by reducing their food supply, which was in this case horses instead of buffalo. They rode the horses, their whole culture was based on these horses, but it was also their food source. They ate them as well. And so they encouraged the killing until they were almost all gone.
Foi quando Emílio Solanet interferiu para salvar a raça da extinção. Na Argentina, as fazendas são chamadas de estâncias. Essa é a estância da família Solanet, El Cardal, a Casa do Espinho. A família Solanet emigrou da França em meados do século XIX para criar gado nos chamados Pampas Alagados, 480 quilômetros ao sul de Buenos Aires. A família prosperou e construiu uma bela casa de fazenda. E Emílio pôde estudar ciências veterinárias na Universidade de Buenos Aires. Depois de formado, ele passou a ser o mais novo professor da universidade, mas logo descobriu que sua vocação não estava no meio acadêmico, mas na criação de cavalos. Os cavalos selvagens dos Pampas, antes tão numerosos, agora estavam confinados às distantes fronteiras da Argentina. Assim, ele partiu para encontrá-los. Oscar, filho de Emílio Solanet, administra a fazenda atualmente.
My father was convinced that the wild horse was perfect for working in the fields and for the army. But the numbers were dwindling, and also there'd been a lot of interbreeding with other imported breeds.
Mas onde ele encontraria descendentes puros do valente cavalo selvagem? Emílio Solanet procurou na província mais remota da Argentina, a Patagônia. Ele estava determinado a encontrar os animais certos para procriar.
He made 3 journeys to the far south, in Patagonia, in 1911, 1913 and 1919. He went on horseback to Comodoro Rivadavia and onto the mountains where the Tehuelche Indians lived. He chose 2 or maximum 3 mares from each tribe, looking for the best characteristics, what's called a morphological selection.
Logo ele reuniu 84 éguas e garanhões e os levou para El Cardal, uma viagem de 1.600 quilômetros que durou 6 semanas.
Don Emilio started a very meticulous breeding program, keeping exact records of each animal, their size and lineage.
Ele realizou a tarefa como um cientista, mas tinha propósitos práticos. Ele queria produzir um cavalo ideal para o vaqueiro trabalhar, que fosse veloz, ágil, valente e de boa índole. Ele especificou a altura máxima de 1,52 m. Cabeça pequena, pescoço musculoso e ombros robustos. Em 1922, as autoridades argentinas reconheceram oficialmente a raça e lhe deram o nome de crioulo.
Criollo is Creole. That's what it is. And Creole means mixed, something of mixed ancestry. Now, there have been people who would like to put a negative connotation on that, and I think that's very unfortunate. The word criollo in Argentina has more than one meaning, and for the Argentinian, it has a deep meaning. Criollo means countryman. It means, in Russian, it would be comrade. That's what it means, but and so it cuts deep. Criollo is a term of pride.
Uma vez por ano, os criadores argentinos de cavalos crioulos se reúnem para exibir seus espécimes em Buenos Aires. Os vaqueiros do país também mostram suas habilidades em uma competição que dura 5 dias. Eles exibem a força e agilidade que fazem dos crioulos os cavalos perfeitos para cuidar do gado. Isso acontece na mesma arena onde Emílio Solanet foi premiado ano após ano e que depois recebeu o seu nome. Mas qual era o segredo de seu sucesso? O que é preciso para ser um criador mestre?
First of all, they must really want to do it because it will take a lot of time. And there'll be a lot of heartbreak as well. The horses are really good at leveling you because things go wrong. You think you've got a perfect horse bred and then something goes terribly wrong. If you compare the horse to the pig, for example, the pig will have a litter several times during the time of one pregnancy in the horse. And when they have a litter, they could have 15, 16 piglets. Whereas with the horse, you only have one. You then have got a long time before they become mature. You've then got to prove the animal, and it may well not prove to be fast enough. It may not be flexible enough or move and turn quickly enough. You've got to really wait for 4 or 5 years before you've got much of an idea.
Don Emilio really was a man who who could distinguish a good horse. He had the eye, he had the experience, and he knew what he wanted. But he was also able to breed a good horse, and this latter task was considerably more difficult than the first one. So I think there's a good deal of the genius of Emilio Solanet summed up in that sentence.
They just have this knack, almost a sort of sixth sense about what's right, because they often do what appear to scientists as really odd things and get quite remarkable results. So I think they have to have flair as well. It doesn't sound very scientific, but at the moment breeding horses is very much an art rather than a science.
Solanet combinou a intuição do artista e a precisão do cientista de outra forma admirável. Ele criou um método de classificar os cavalos por sua característica mais óbvia, a cor. Mas o que parecia simples provou ser uma tarefa difícil.
In Argentina, they have a terminology that was current among the gauchos in Solanet's time, which was far more descriptive. This is analogous to if you go to Sweden, they have 300 words for snow. Likewise, in Argentina, they have 300 words for different colors of horses. Solanet, however, being an educated man, thought, here is a place where I can apply what they taught me in school about this new theory of genetics. If you have a descriptive lingo for what kind of snow this is, in other words, or what kind of color this horse has, now you've got a way to separate horses that look rather similar but are in fact genetically different. Because what's on the outside is a manifestation of something going on the inside. If you look at enough horses through several generations, you can begin to make decently reliable predictions about what will happen. What are you going to get in the foal if you breed a mother with X color to father with a different color? In English, we still don't have a widespread knowledge of this more detailed, more accurate terminology for the coat colors of horses. And this is Solanet's one of his special interests.
Ano após ano, novo potro crioulo chegava ao mundo e a sua ascendência era cuidadosamente controlada e registrada. A visão de Solanet começava a tomar forma. Ele tinha certeza de que sua nova raça era tão resistente quanto a original. Mas como provaria isso ao mundo? Na pequena cidade de Luján, ao norte de Buenos Aires, há um museu com uma exposição interessante. Dentro de vitrines estão 2 cavalos empalhados, Mancha e Gato. Eles estão ali há 60 anos para lembrar uma das maiores façanhas de montaria já realizadas. Aimé Schiffley nasceu na Suíça. Professor em Buenos Aires e excelente cavaleiro, ele soube da criação de Solanet e escreveu para ele em El Cardal. Perguntou se Dom Emílio acreditava que seus cavalos sobreviveriam a uma jornada de 16.000 quilômetros até Nova York. Solanet anotou no fim da carta que seus cavalos chegariam ao Polo Norte.
Schiffley was 30 at the time, and that still a young man, and he was looking for adventure. He had been teaching for some years, and he was looking for another challenge. He thought that this could be a great help for the criollo horse cause. If he would succeed, that would be a tremendous impact, not only in Argentina but internationally. Now looking back, one can see Don Emilio laughing by himself about this Suizo loco who doesn't know anything about criollo and so on, proposing such a trip. But he didn't want to spoil the fiesta.
Mas isso também era um desafio para Solanet. A reputação de seus adorados crioulos dependia de um professor que se tornara explorador. Os especialistas ainda se impressionam com a empreitada que ele assumiu com 2 cavalos já passados da meia-idade. Mancha, o mais velho, tinha 16 anos e Gato tinha 15 anos.
In the annals of the unbelievable, it would be right in there. Schiffli says, I positively got sick and tired of hearing people say that criollos weren't worth anything.
A rota que Schiffli escolhera testaria os cavalos de Solanet ao máximo. Ele partiria de Buenos Aires rumo ao noroeste pelos campos que acompanhavam a Cordilheira dos Andes e desceria pela Colômbia em direção à América Central. Ali enfrentaria os perigos das florestas, antes de percorrer trechos do tórrido deserto no México. E se chegasse aos Estados Unidos, ainda teria de atravessar 5.000 quilômetros até o fim da jornada. Essa viagem épica começou no dia 23 de abril de 1925. Schiffli deixou Buenos Aires, ora andando, ora montado, mas sempre obstinadamente rumando para o noroeste. Agora, a realidade da empreitada que assumira começava a pesar. A Argentina é o 8º maior país do mundo e a maioria duvidava que ele chegasse até a fronteira.
Don Emilio thought that the chap might get as far as Rosario de Santa Fe, which is about 300 or 400 kilometers north of Buenos Aires, and from there he would return by train to start teaching again, you know.
Mas ele já provava que os céticos estavam errados. Atravessando o terreno hostil e sempre ascendente ao pé dos Andes, eles avançaram a velocidade média de 32 km por dia e cruzaram a primeira fronteira com a Bolívia. Mas logo o ritmo diminuiu quando atingiram 3.300 metros de altitude. Eles passaram 3 semanas naquela altitude. Schiffli registrou que seu nariz sangrou com o ar rarefeito e que os cavalos seguiam vagarosamente. Ele fez uma máscara para proteger o rosto da areia e das pedras de granizo, mas os aldeões assustados o tomaram por um demônio. Adiante estava o Peru e teriam de atravessar um abismo sobre uma ponte de cordas de 1 metro de largura.
It's an astonishing height. He had to go through these incredibly dangerous one-way passages, barely wide enough for the horse's belly. And many a person had fallen down into the chasm. There's a cliff on one side and a chasm on the other side. And if 2 men meet and they didn't know that they were coming, they happen to meet in the middle, there is no way to turn around, so one guy pulls out his gun and plugs the other one.
Depois dos perigos das montanhas, haveria um risco ainda maior, o deserto de Mata Caballo, onde Mancha e Gato afundaram na areia até os joelhos. Mata Caballo significa mata cavalo.
No water for 150 kilometers. People had advised him not to go because that would be sure death. But he got through. More than one time he got ill. He got a bad blood poisoning that had been going on for weeks. No doctor around, no cure. He went on, and finally a local healer was able to cure him.
À medida que se desenrolava a incrível jornada, uma pessoa acompanhou bem de perto os acontecimentos. Para Emílio Solanet, essa era a prova de tudo que ele afirmara sobre seus crioulos. Sua admiração por Schiffli também crescia. Agora estavam separados por milhares de quilômetros, mas continuavam em contato. Schiffli mandava despachos sempre que podia.
Many times he mentions at the end of the letter to Don Emilio that his main purpose is to arrive, no matter when he arrives, but he wanted to arrive with the 2 horses in good condition. Whatever the conditions of the place, his first care was for the horses. He looked for protection, for food and so on, and only afterwards he looked after himself.
Depois de 2 anos cavalgando, Schiefele chegou ao Panamá. Aqueles que duvidaram dele e de seus crioulos se calaram. Ele se tornara uma celebridade, mas isso traria outros problemas.
He was a shy man. He was very embarrassed when he was the center of attention and so on, which of course he was all along.
He wasn't trying to be famous. Yeah, there was no ego in this at all that I can detect. But there was a commitment to facing life, facing up to life, and meeting it head on, and to see if he had the stuff. He decided to cut out for himself a task that would be worthy of being a man.
Quando chegaram aos Estados Unidos, os 3 viajantes já eram celebridades. Todos queriam obter o autógrafo de Schiefele e saber de seus maravilhosos crioulos, parentes próximos dos Mustangs americanos. A fama os precedeu em Washington, onde o presidente Calvin Coolidge preparou uma recepção na Casa Branca. 3 anos depois, a jornada chegou ao fim. O prefeito Jimmy Walker, de Nova York, concedeu a Schiefele a medalha da cidade. Ele completou o que muitas pessoas ainda consideravam a cavalgada mais longa de todos os tempos. Foi ali que se estabeleceu a reputação do cavalo crioulo. Emílio Solané era um criador mestre, mas sempre reconheceu seu débito aos primeiros conquistadores.
The blood of Spain carries through in a way that's remarkably consistent and identifiable wherever it is seen. Her head is the same triangular shape with slightly arched facial profile and good, big, substantial room for the nostrils, and yet wedge-shaped because the jowl is so big and deep, with that lovely, big, dark, intelligent eye. She also has a very pretty arched neck. It's set high on the shoulders and is apt to make that curving shape. That was something that was bred for in medieval Spain. Her primary job as a riding horse is to carry somebody's weight. And if they don't readily adopt the posture that makes weight bearing the easiest, then the horse will suffer over time just from the fact that he's being ridden. But these horses stand up to it extremely well because they're built for it. And that's because the knowledgeable breeders in medieval Spain made sure that they had the right build. And people in South America have continued that tradition. The other really wonderful thing about this horse, and so many of these Spanish breds, I don't think I've ever seen a bad one, is that they are broad and muscular right over this zone. This is the loins of the horse, where you would cut the tenderloin if she was a cow carcass. The loins are really what enable, that's the athletic center. So when a horse has to run fast, this section of their body is going to coil up, and then it's going to uncoil. And this is what allows the hind legs to come up under the body. Every joint, I mean, look at the width of this knee and the substantial construction, short and thick through the cross section of the cannon bone. Short, not too short, not too long in the pasterns, and good angle. So this is a horse that's liable to be sound her life. This horse is going to live to be 35 years old or better.
I knew from the beginning. After having read Chifley's book, I never thought about another breed. I was just so convinced in my own mind that it had to be Criollos.
80 anos após a jornada épica de M. Chifley, o crioulo seria testado novamente. A sul-africana Marianne du Toit procurava uma aventura, mas também queria arrecadar dinheiro para uma escola de equitação para deficientes da Irlanda, onde ela mora. Os pontos de partida e de chegada seriam os mesmos, de Buenos Aires a Nova York. Seria diferente cruzar o mesmo terreno 8 décadas mais tarde?
I got great admiration for him, for having undertaken it in the times that he did. I think so many areas would have been much more isolated where he went. I think he would have had more difficulty than I did to find food. Now, through some parts I had, that was very hard as well. Many days I couldn't find food for the horses, and that was really difficult. The most dangerous part was probably going through the mountains in Bolivia with altitude up to 4,000 meters above sea level, which is really high. And that was very hard, very tough on the horses to breathe. They're very special. I think the fact that they are not so big and they're not fragile, although they're quite small, they're very strong-boned, and they just have great endurance. They just seem to be able to go and go.
Depois de séculos pastando solto nos pampas, o crioulo aprendeu a se alimentar de tudo que seja comestível. Se o pasto escassear, ele come de cactos até galhos de árvores.
On a journey like this especially, you cannot be worried about their digestive system, what if they colic, if you change their diet. And my horses ate something different every single day, and some people in the horse world will probably be mortified if they hear that. And the Criollos, Misha and Tusa, just both managed to be exposed to that kind of lifestyle.
Aimé Chifley alegou ter aprendido quase tudo sobre montaria durante a viagem a Nova York. O mesmo aconteceu nesta ocasião.
My horses never had saddle sores. A gaucho actually from Bolivia gave me the idea and said, on a day's ride I have to saddle down and take everything off at least twice. Now of course that sounds like a nightmare, because you're just so happy to get them settled in the morning and then settle down in the evening, but their backs get too moist from all the heat that if you take the saddle blanket and everything off, the backs get to breathe. And I did that twice a day, every day that I was riding, which was really difficult physically, but my horses never had sores.
Chifley viajou com um revólver carregado em seu alforge, e alguns pontos do trajeto ainda são perigosos.
Especially as I got into Central America, following his steps where he went, I got a kind of a feeling and a taste of what he must have felt like when he went through those parts more than 80 years ago. This is the kind of journey I didn't put too much emphasis on the danger and didn't think about it too much. I haven't been assaulted. I was held up in Central America, but we were very lucky and the thieves ran away after somebody came along.
Mas certas coisas mudaram em 80 anos, e dessa vez só um dos crioulos chegou aos Estados Unidos. Com as leis de quarentena e um controle mais rigoroso dos animais importados, Tuja, de 10 anos, foi diagnosticado com anemia equina infecciosa, uma doença fatal. Logo depois que essa fotografia foi feita, ele teve de ser sacrificado. Foi um momento doloroso, mas Marianne decidiu levar o outro crioulo de avião da Guatemala para a Flórida para continuar a jornada. Toto, um cavalo de marcha, se juntou a Misha.
I think it's been hard on them, and that's why I'm saying that, you know, the horses are the star of the strip. They are the real heroes. They've done great. Especially Misha, that she managed to get through the strip 18 months, going through so many hardships and cold and hunger and high mountains, and she just persevered. I just really got such a strong bond with her.
Com a mudança de planos, em vez dos 16 mil quilômetros de Emei Chifli, ela completaria apenas 10 mil quilômetros. Ainda assim, foi uma façanha extraordinária que resultou em 2 anos de aventuras para recordar. Amanhã, tudo terminará quando ela cobrir os últimos quilômetros até a cidade de Nova York. Emílio Solanet apreciava essa raça tanto pela resistência como pela índole, mas o que explica as características de lealdade e confiança do crioulo. Esse homem é especialista em comportamento de cavalos. Usando as técnicas desenvolvidas pelos índios durante os séculos de relacionamento com o crioulo, ele pode levar o animal a fazer quase tudo o que ele pede. Foi assim que os índios ganharam uma posição de vantagem na planície dos Pampas. Ele acredita que os crioulos de hoje ainda carregam lembranças dos ancestrais indígenas.
Basically, the symbiotic relationship between the Indian and the horse started through his beliefs, seeing it like something that is sacred. On the other hand, the white man almost considered the horse like a slave or a machine, without any understanding of its spirit or its fear. They just needed it to work, to fight, to ride, to plow. In my view, it was vital for this country that Solanet recovered this breed, because for many years the economy has been based on the back of the criollo, the horse that never gets tired whilst working. The criollo horse has fed millions of people in Argentina. We are free because of the criollo horse. The criollo horse helped to set free Argentina, Chile, and Peru. Look how important the criollo horse is. The liberating army of San Martin changed the history of a nation on a criollo horse's back. So it is only just that it should be honored.
Esto es justicia.
O papel do crioulo nas guerras estava no topo da lista de prioridades de Solanet. Quando ele esboçou seus primeiros planos de reprodução, a cavalaria ainda era parte importante do exército argentino. Solanet havia servido como oficial. Quando a raça estava bem estabelecida e ele havia se tornado uma figura nacional, presenteou o presidente Juan Perón com 100 crioulos para o exército. Hoje a cavalaria só se apresenta em desfiles de grande importância. Uma tropa de crioulos sempre conduz à guarda presidencial.
There's only one army unit that has Criollo horses, the Cavalry Regiment of General Saint-Martin. The presidential escort currently has 18 horses for ceremonial use, but we've recently received a donation of 27 more Criollos to make a second parade unit. They're easy to look after. The Criollo is very calm and sensible. It's a down-to-earth horse. It doesn't get sick and doesn't get injured very often. Because of its calm nature, it's easy to ride. It feels relaxed too. The Criollo troop is responsible for putting on shows because the Criollos are very suited to performing different kinds of skills, like turning fast and crossing between each other. It's just perfect for those kind of things.
Há outro campo em que as características do crioulo são insuperáveis. O cavalo dos Pampas é um elemento fundamental no esporte mais exclusivo do mundo.
Polo ponies are typically 7/8 thoroughbred, 1/8 Criollo. The Criollo part of the polo pony is of key importance. The polo pony is quite, in my opinion, quite a unique creature. To me, it's the super horse because it combines the qualities of a racehorse, the speed, with that of a dressage pony to go from side to side. The Criollo that's working with the cattle, you take that pony, you put it out on the polo ground, stop, turn, go, stop, turn, exactly the same. The key importance that we look for in a polo pony is a nice strong set of shoulders, and typically the strength of bone will come from the Criollo pony. We need the slightly long pasterns from the thoroughbred, but a little bit of the thicker bone from the Criollo. We look for a shorter back, not too long a back, so nice compact short back, and a very strong powerhouse in the hindquarters. Again, an important feature from the Criollo. Lung capacity, again, from the thoroughbred. So you can see how they work hand in hand to produce the ideal polo pony for us.
Outra característica importante do crioulo é que ele nunca perde a calma.
A brilliant polo pony is a horse that literally runs very quickly in a straight line, stops, turns on a sixpence, comes back, stops, and literally would then put his head down to nibble on grass. It's that type of nature that doesn't really give too much bother about things, and yet is so responsive to the touch. We describe them as 100-mile-an-hour donkeys. Now the donkey side is the placid, relaxed nature of the Criollo, and that is key.
Depois de viajar 2 anos, partindo de Buenos Aires, esse dia vai marcar o fim da jornada e é preciso começar cedo. Durante boa parte da viagem, nos vales empoeirados e nas trilhas da floresta, os cavalos não precisaram de ferradura.
We're going to ride into New York City. We're going to go on asphalt and do about 9 miles. So this is, yes, the real last set of shoes that she would get for the journey.
Eles atravessam o Central Park, escoltados pela patrulha montada da polícia de Nova York. Ela segue os passos exatos do pioneiro, Aimé Schiffley, que cruzou o parque com seus 2 crioulos em 1928.
I don't know really what to feel and what to think. I'm exhilarated, I'm happy, I'm a little bit nervous, great excitement, but I'm sad too that my journey has come to an end. Misha is here with me, my beloved Criollo. She has been extraordinary and just proved how fantastic she is. She kept going and this is the end.
Passado o perigo dos Andes e das florestas da América Central, os cavalos agora precisam enfrentar o tráfego de Manhattan. Mas finalmente encontram um local calmo para parar e encerrar a jornada. Aqui estão reunidos a família e os amigos que ela não vê há 2 anos. E as emoções afloram. O herói dos cavaleiros, Aimé Schiffley, também teve uma recepção admirável. Não uma, mas 2 vezes. Ao terminar a jornada, ele voltou para El Cardal, o lar da família Solané. Embora Emílio duvidasse dele no início, os 2 se tornaram amigos até o fim da vida, mas nenhum deles esqueceu os cavalos que os tornaram famosos. Mancha e Gato viveram até os 36 e 38 anos. Seus corpos estão preservados nesse museu, mas seus corações foram enterrados em El Cardal, nesse monumento erguido por Dom Emílio. Quando Aimé Schiffley morreu em 1954, seu corpo foi enterrado em Buenos Aires. Mas ele faria sua última jornada em 2000. Seus restos foram levados para El Cardal, a pedido da família Solané. O escritório em que Emílio Solané trabalhou até morrer em 1969 é mantido como um santuário em sua memória. Sua jaqueta de montar ainda está pendurada na cadeira. Sua sela de vaqueiro ainda está na varanda. O que ele conquistou está presente em toda a estância e no mundo inteiro, onde crioulos descendentes de seu rebanho agora são criados em países como Alemanha, França e Itália.
Entonces creo que es un acto de justicia haber rescatado su raza, su estirpe, para que algo tan emblemático que ha sido para este país, que ha nutrido la economía de este país, es justo que sea rescatado como emblema y como espíritu de la nacionalidad argentina.
Emílio Solané morreu aos 92 anos de idade e, como seus cavalos queridos, ele trabalhou até o fim.
What makes greatness? If you look at Michelangelo, he's a genius, but he also stuck with it. He was painting a ceiling until 2 days before he died. And this is what Solanette's expressing. That's a life work. So by any measure, that's mastery.